Wolf Pack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street, rotostreetjournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves, and I am thrilled to welcome onto the show for the first time Mr. Justin Herzig, the OG winner of Underdog's first Best Ball Mania tournament, taking home a smooth $200K, if I'm not mistaken. Not a bad payday there. And I believe the only person to ever make all three Best Ball finals. Truly the brightest best ball mind in the game, in my opinion, covers that content over at Establish the Run, plus the podcast he just launched, the DraftKings Football Show. He's also the co-founder of Own the Moment NFT, which you can find at Own the Moment NFT. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Justin. So pumped to have you. How are you doing, my man?
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. We are, 9 days away from the season starting. We finally got some Jonathan Taylor news today. It is a good time to be drafted.
I know. Yeah, I got to ask you at the top there. How is your Jonathan Taylor exposure? You in on him too bad or not too shabby?
Yeah, so early on, I think I had around 2% of him when he was going late second, early third. Overall, just kind of pessimistic on his role in that offense with Anthony Richardson there. I mean, you basically brought in a better goal line back who's also not going to get you to the red zone that often and doesn't throw to his running backs because why would he? He could just run. So, wasn't a good situation, minimal high-value touches. And then as he started dropping in the late third, early fourth, I was like, you know what? This is my time to get my exposure. So my 2% went up to 6%, but at least that, additional 4% is at that late third, early fourth. And so I feel pretty good about it. And then a lot of Dolphins. That's the one that I feel best about after today.
Yeah, those Dolphin RBs definitely going to be shooting up in value. We'll see how the market adjusts over these last 9 days. I do just got to start at the top. As mentioned in your intro, 3 straight finals, the only player to ever do that. How? What do you attribute your success to? Is there any big tips or just any big overarching strategies that you think you've ridden, or what do you attribute your success to so far?
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of it has to come to looking at the macro of what's going on that year for drafts and adapting to it. For year one, I was very, very heavy on the hyper-fragile strategy. I would grab 4 running backs in the first kind of 8-9 rounds. And the reason why is because I had confidence I could find good value on wide receivers later on in drafts. Next year, that team won the BBM, so a lot of people started doing hyper-fragile builds. And then what we also see is that wide receivers start moving up. And as the wide receivers start moving up, that and people are grabbing running backs earlier, it made less sense to go hyper fragile. Instead, I was like, hey, I'm going to go 2 early on, and then I'm going to grab 3 in that 10th and 11th, because those are running backs that usually were going in the 8th, 9th, fall into the 10th, 11th, and then you can kind of say, okay, this is how I'm kind of ebb and flowing as the drafts go. And then that third year was the first one where we started looking a lot more in the kind of correlation aspects, the playoff aspects, stacking just being that much more important. And this year, it's not so much about making the BBM, but really playing for that top prize in week 17. Put out a ton of content, obviously, on this. Happy to touch on more, but that's the kind of the general high level.
Awesome. Yeah. When we're talking about strategies there, but what are some mistakes that you see from newcomers coming to best ball? Because it's starting to really explode right now, and we've seen a lot more people getting into it, and I think it's got a lot of room to grow. But some of these newer people, what are you seeing them doing wrong in their drafts?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is probably just someone gets one bit of information, they learn one piece, and they really just kind of start overdoing it. And maybe hey, they hear this year, you got to grab wide receivers early. So then they grab 4 wide receivers, 5 wide receivers in the first 4 or 5 rounds. And then they keep grabbing wide receivers and they end up with 9 because they're like, hey, they took what is a right strategy of grabbing wide receivers early, but then they overdid it by continuing to grab more later on. Or maybe it's, hey, week 17, that's what's really important. So then they over exaggerate and make sure to get that week 17 correlation when in reality they're giving up ADP value. They're giving up general roster construction aspects. They're giving up priority of your actual primary stacking. And so there's a lot of kind of edges to be had in the game. I think the challenge is, or maybe this is the level 2 mistake where it's okay, I realize what one of those edges are, and then I just take it too far at the unfortunate, you're missing out on the value at the other areas.
Yeah, 100%. No, it's great tips for everybody to listen to. Well, we're going to fire up a draft. I know that's why a lot of people were here. Before we do, I would love, if you don't mind, just giving me a couple minutes and reviewing my quote-unquote best ball portfolio. This is one of the first years I've really put a lot into it. I know it's not going to be the atypical profile. So I'm going to pull that up for you. I was listening to your podcast earlier today, so I think there's a few players at least that we're pretty aligned in. But I want to just get your take here, so let me add that to the stream. And if you can see it, I'll zoom in a little bit as well, and also read this out for people that might be listening to the podcast here. So at the top of my exposure is Tank Dell. I will say I was taking him as my last round guy in every draft. Got to give that preface. I haven't drafted him since he spiked to a couple rounds, but that was my guy. And I just got to, when I had no one else that I liked in that last round, I had taken him. Then you can see Daniel Jones. My next high is 41%. So I'm kind of nervous about that, and I'm intrigued to hear what you have to say. Like, is that way too all in on a single player? What mistakes I might be making? But Joe Mixon, Connor, Gibson all around 35%. Campbell stacking up with Danny Jones, Dubs, KJ Osborne, then Patterson is a last round guy, Debo. So, Rashad Penny. I can keep going. Marquise Brown, 26%. Taysom, I hate. I'm so mad. That was one of my early guys, and I have not drafted him in a long time. Pissed about that one. But that just kind of gives you a sampling of, one, just how I've gone kind of all in on certain players. And two, do you think I'm an idiot for some of the players I've gone in on? So just an overall macro player takes. However you want to review my portfolio, Justin, slam me.
Yeah, so starting off with the players aspect, there are some guys here that I really like and some guys that I don't. But to be honest, like, that's to be fully expected. At the top of, like, hey, Daniel Jones, he's my highest owned QB as well. Absolutely love him. Feel that he's just doesn't make sense where he's being drafted. He was QB9 last year when he didn't have Darren Waller, he didn't have Jalen Hyatt, he didn't have Harris Campbell, and now he's going QB 14, 15 this year. And he's also being drafted in a bit of a dead zone where you don't want wide receivers because you've got a cliff. He's actually going where, like, now past those running backs that we really like the Gibson or the Brian Robinson and such. So yeah, love Daniel Jones. Now on a more macro aspect, I personally am rarely getting above 25% on any player, because here's the way that I approach it. When I see that I'm starting to get above 25%, I do a couple things. First off, I start asking myself, like, why am I high on this player? And then I start asking other people, like, hey, why might I be wrong? And just really trying to dive into this and figure out, like, either A, I am actually wrong, I've got a blind spot, I'm being too biased, I'm missing something. And in those situations, I'm like, okay, let me correct a little. Let me start, staying off this player and adjusting. Or what I learn is that, no, I know why people don't like him, and I see something different. I'm still bullish on him. I still want to draft that player, and that's okay. But what I then start doing is saying, maybe I could take this player around later, because now I may not draft him as often, but now the times I do get him, I'm getting more value, because if I'm taking someone more than 25%, it means I'm likely reaching a substantial amount of time. So a player like Daniel Jones, his ADP might be 115 or something. Now, maybe I'm like, okay, instead of taking him that 108, let me diversify and grab an Anthony Richardson. Let me grab some stack partners that are also going to that area, because a lot of times I'm still going to get Daniel Jones, maybe at pick 118, pick 120, and I can still get, like, be overweight on him. But now the times I am getting him, I'm also getting additional value.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I actually, the Anthony Richardson swap is the exact one I've been trying to do lately to drive down my Daniel Jones ownership here. So that makes total sense. I'm glad to hear that that's another guy you're targeting, and at least you like the quarterback that I'm all in on. I know some of these other ones, so that's definitely a takeaway for me, because, I mean, I have a bunch of players over 25% that I'm going to try to drive down to these last. I'm at actually exactly 100 best ball mania so far. So as I say that, why don't we just get in the lobby, get this fired up, and hopefully we'll, in these last 50, I can start to balance this portfolio out a little bit. A little too rich on certain guys at this point. But thank you to review that for me. I appreciate it.
We got 9 days. Are you planning on doing 50 more? Are you going full? What are your thoughts?
I'm hoping to. It's going to be a big squeeze. Obviously, with school starting right now, the time gets a little tighter. I'm not a big slow drafter. I like the thrill of the fast draft. And do you have any opinions on that? Like slow versus fast?
I have many. Yeah, I probably have some of the strongest in the industry. I think slow drafts. I get it. Some people, it is best for them. I've heard if you have kids, if you have, like, you don't have the time to commit to these, but you want to draft, I completely get it. For me personally, I think it is a complete drain on my mental health, because all I'm thinking about all day is I'm on the clock. I'm looking at notifications. Literally would go to bed and either dream or have nightmares about, like, being on the clock. Like, I'd wake up and, like, immediately first thing you do in the morning is you look at your phone, you see, did you miss any picks? Did you have to queue up? Like, it just, I'm drafting all summer. So, like, it literally was like 3 to 4 months of just, like, always being kind of on edge and in this draft mindset. And so as I've kind of said, you know what, I'm going to I multi-draft. I usually try to do 2 drafts at a time on different sites to get my exposure that way. But let me just take this 45 minutes, focus fully on it, and then I might be done for a couple hours. Maybe I do some more later. Unfortunately, I'm now on the clock, or I have about 7 or 8 slow drafts because of some tournaments that were closing out, and I know I needed to get in. So you got to do what you got to do, but for the most part, I'm a fully fast draft and 3 spot, not too bad.
Yeah, we landed at 3 pick here. McCaffrey, Jefferson. Is it a no-brainer? Just Jamar Chase at this point?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's an easy call.
So. What about you, Justin? Is there anybody else you'd even consider here?
No, not at all. And it's not so much that I am that confident that Jamar Chase is going to outscore Tyreek Hill or Cooper Kupp, but when you're doing enough of these drafts and you're getting a large enough portfolio, when you're starting to take another player above someone like Jamar Chase, if you're taking Christian McCaffrey above Jamar Chase and you're doing that every time, you're going to end up with virtually none of that other player, and that's just not a stand I want to take in the first round.
Yeah. Absolutely. And now, had Chase, the typical draft goes Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Would you have considered CMC there at 3, or are you still, because of that quote unquote wide receiver avalanche this year, would you have tried to dive into the Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp range? What would you have done had Chase not been falling to us there?
Yeah, still probably done CMC for that same logic of if you start taking Tyreek Hill above CMC, then you're just not going to end up with CMC. Yeah. So it gives you that balanced approach. Early on in the draft season, I think there was a little more argument for maybe you wanted to go Tyreek or something, because early on it was, hey, you grab CMC, and there were so many of these running backs we loved at the end of the second, early third, because at the time that was Barkley, that was even Chubb, that was Pollard, that was Josh Jacobs, that was JT. They hit him, I miss some. But then it's shit, maybe I don't want to draft a running back here because my next 2 are going to be running backs. So that's where it's okay, I get if you wanted to go Tyreek and then go RB, I kind of got it. But in my mind, it made sense. Hey, ADPs change, news changes, all those things are changing. So get your ownership, get your diversified portfolio, and as the season goes on, then you can figure out if you need to adjust.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's crazy too. You see Chubb, Pollard, Barkley all going here at the 1-2 turn, as you alluded to, in early June. Those guys were falling to 24, 25. I have a team with Justin Jefferson, Pollard, and Barkley, which I just love. And the rest of the team's actually pretty live too. So I'm a big fan of that one. Obviously not something you can construct these days. But yeah, I totally get that take. So you draft Jamar Chase. Is your immediate thought now week 17 Chiefs? How quickly do you turn on the week 17 correlation? I know you alluded to that at the beginning.
Yeah, and before that, I'm going to jump real quick. Looking at the draft here, just seeing this Kyler Lee aspect. I got a great value at Cooper Kupp in that 8th spot, but then completely destroyed the value with Derrick Henry. And even if you're a Derrick Henry fan, you got a unique opportunity to get Cooper Kupp and someone like Devontae Adams, which is a unique ownership, but pass it up where Cooper Kupp, Derrick Henry is extremely popular because you can usually get Derrick Henry later on. We'll get to the So Patrick Mahomes goes there. I personally would not be going Mahomes for the week 17 correlation. I think if anything, there's a lot stronger correlation with the Joe Burrow aspect. Usually when I grab Jamar Chase, I like to go with someone else, best player available, and then see if T can fall to us. So yeah, I'm great with Waddle here. And the benefit of doing that is 2 things are going to happen. Either 1, we get T Higgins to fall back to us in the 3rd round, which is great value. And now we're going to be able to get Joe Burrow without fighting anyone for it. Or 2, T Higgins goes. But the thing is, if T Higgins goes here, we get the Joe Burrow pick before these guys do. So we're going to be able to get that Jamar Chase and not have to worry about kind of getting sniped by a T Higgins drafter who was going beforehand.
Absolutely, yes. So we'll see if T can make his way down to us. Should he go? Jacobs, now that he's back and reported, is that a guy you'd be intrigued at this point? Round 3 seems like a decent value.
I would probably honestly go Josh Jacobs over T Higgins, even if it comes back to us.
I was thinking the same thing.
Right. So you mentioned you listened to the pod, but on that DraftKings show, which I think I recorded it on Tuesday last week, that was the first time when we had the local Las Vegas Journal with that smoke before fire aspect. And I was saying, I think he should be going at the 2-3 turn right then. And that was before we even had the confirmation he was coming back. Now that we know he's back with this $12 million 1-year deal, I think it's right behind Derrick Henry on half PPR. And I think on PPR, I'd put him even higher than that. So yeah, I would go with the Josh Jacobs and say, you know what? Now we're risking giving up the Joe Burrow. But if someone wants to reach on Joe Burrow, hopefully one of these two guys actually takes T. Higgins, because they already have Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes.
Yes.
The tricky bad one is actually a great T. Higgins situation, because he'd get that week 17. He's got the Mahomes-Kelsey stack. T. Higgins bring back. That's the sharp squad if Higgins falls to him here.
100%.
So
That'd be a nice play there.
Now that we've locked down a running back, I was reading your piece on mistakes that some drafters make over on Established to Run, and you talk about not picking up complementary running backs. And I was hoping you could elaborate on what you mean by that overall strategy, and if you have any off the top of your head, some guys that might go well with Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, so I think the overarching message here is that you want to make sure that your team tells a story, and that works within positions as well. We took Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, right now, I'm expecting him to come in week 1. Maybe he misses week 1 or whatever, but we're expecting him to be a workhorse for that year. Let's compare someone like Jahmyr Gibbs as well. If you're going Jahmyr Gibbs, you have to expect that there's going to be kind of a slow ramp up for him. And so in that situation, when I'm thinking through who are the later running backs that I want to pair with him, I'm going to prioritize someone like Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson over someone like Roschon Johnson, who, even though I like him, I'm expecting him to really have his greatest value in the second half of the season. And so that's where it's making sure, hey, as you draft these various running backs, and I think we could look at Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook as another example where you think through what is the narrative around this running back and when do you expect him to kind of struggle and when do you expect him to prosper, and then make sure that the running backs you're building kind of work together as a team. I think as well, let's say we grabbed another running back with this next one that we really like, or maybe we grab Kenneth Walker in the 5th, and now you're okay, I've got Jacobs and Walker. You could maybe make that a 4 RB team. You can make it a 5 RB team, but the fewer running backs I'm going for after getting 2 kind of studs, I'm more likely to later on say, hey, let me grab a running back that actually provides me with a nice median projectable volume, because it's not as important for me to hit the home run if I've already drafted heavily on 3 running backs. Because if you've got, it didn't work out in this one, but let's say that team that at the 12 spot, they had Pollard and Chubb, and if they grab another running back, if they hit on another one in the 10th round, that guy may not even still start. So you're missing out on that upside in a situation where you are spending kind of for it. Burrow goes unstacked in the 6th, so we lost out on that.
I know. And I'm not Taylor falling this late does bring raise the antenna, but I don't know. I got some horrible vibes on that. Anybody in particular you're eyeing here in terms of Mike and Ayuk?
I'd go Mike Williams, and I feel pretty strong about that. I think him and DeAndre Hopkins are a bit of a teardrop above. I think Justin Herbert is still available. Can you double check that?
He went.
He ended up going.
Wow.
Yeah, he's gone.
He went, quarterbacks are flying in this
41.
one.
Okay. I think Jonathan Taylor is probably going to be dropping to the 6th, 7th round in most drafts right now. I don't know how you can draft him with any level of confidence.
Yeah.
I was curious about that.
I think we were talking internally at ETR and trying to figure out what makes sense. And I think something around Javonte Williams is probably the right level of risk reward.
Yeah, that seems to make sense.
What are you thinking that Colts rushing attack looks like in the first 4 weeks? I think obviously the most obvious answer is pretty heavy Anthony Richardson, but I think it can get pretty scary, just the offense in general early on.
So let's think. I mean, they brought in Kareem Hunt, went to visit the Saints, pretty much skipped his practice because he got, said, hey, we'll, come to the Colts and we'll provide you a little more. So that's definitely top of mind. Looking through this. So I would go DeAndre Hopkins from an ADP as well as kind of from a talent perspective. As I said, I think he's a tier above the others. I saw you queued up Darren Waller. I think from a strategy aspect, Darren Waller is probably the worst possible pick at his current ADP, because even if he has an amazing season and he gets you to the playoffs, your best case scenario is against other teams that got him 4 rounds later and are also in the playoffs. So your best case scenario is fighting an uphill battle on how good your team is, because all these other teams also advanced with him, but they have him in the 8th, 9th, 10th round.
Yeah, he was going 81, 90 in some of those early drafts. I have actually about 20% exposure to Darren Waller, but ultimately I have not been, similar to what you're saying, that exact type of mentality. You're going to be competing with him, but somebody has way more stacked roster from those earlier picks. So I think that makes complete sense. Absolutely there.
You got so much.
Yeah.
You got so much Daniel Jones. You probably did a bunch of Waller Jones and like back-to-back picks and absolutely loved it. And like those are looking so good right now. But even if you still love Waller, you just can't be chasing him up this high.
Exactly. You truly could go Waller round 9 and then Daniel Jones round 10 for a long time. So that was the good glory days. And hopefully those teams are lightening up later down the stretch here. But through now 6 picks, we've got 4 receivers: Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Mike Williams, DeAndre Hopkins, plus Jacobs, a kind of hero RB approach here, some might call it. I like the squad a lot so far. Definitely stabilize that receiving core with a lot of consistency plus boom week upside. So I'm enjoying this squad a lot. Where are you thinking next here? What should we be targeting?
Yeah, so I'm working my way back a little. I think Tua is our primary target, and that's something like pick 93, 94. What pick is that? 94.
94,
But we want to be careful who the Tyreek owner is, but the Tyreek owner has Jalen Hurts. So it's a little less likely that's the 4 pick that he grabs Tua. So most likely we should be able to get Tua in that 94, which I think is a good QB for this scenario, and gives us that flexibility for maybe ending up with just 2 QBs. Because this looks like it's likely going to be a 3 tight end team. So once we know, like, okay, so this is going to be a Tua, 2 QB, or maybe 3 and a 3 tight end team, we then want to consider, okay, this is probably a 7 wide receiver team because of how much we've invested. And that would then put it at a 5 or 6 running back team. If this is a 5 or 6 running back team, we only have Jacobs. That's where I want to say, okay, we should be keeping an eye out. We probably want to be going with a running back and wide receiver combo, maybe at these next 2, or even running back if there's 2 guys we really like.
Perfect. I think that's great point overall. And just one of my favorite writers in the space as well, Hayden Winks. He has some great stuff. And it brings up that idea, the law of diminishing returns he often cites. I think you were kind of getting into that where you were talking about like Barkley, Pollard. You could hit a round 10 running back out of the park and it doesn't matter. I'm starting to feel that way about our receivers. Of course, receivers have a little bit more blow up upside even late. But yeah, I mean, over 7 receivers might be overkill when we have 4 of our first 5 picks invested in the position. So I think that's a great pick. Great point there. And now we can start looking at running backs, and Taylor is still sitting there. Oh man, is this where we dip our toes in? I certainly didn't want him the last time around. He faces, is it Colts versus the Raiders in week 17 as well, if I'm not mistaken? Oh, there he goes.
That's correct.
All righty. Well, we do have, in terms of running backs, James Cook, the recent darlings, Sanders, Javonte, Montgomery.
Who are the wide receivers real quick?
And we got Mike Evans still sitting there, who I do really like this late.
I'd probably grab Evans and a running back in the next. And I think this gives us just like 5 really strong wide receivers, and we're not really missing a teardrop on the next running backs. And assume we can still get to at that next one. I think this is a really nice squad, Foreman.
Yeah. Now, would you even consider, I know it would be completely uncorrelated, and it's why I was considering Christian Kirk where we took Hopkins. I just want pieces of this Jags offense, and I know we have nobody. When do you risk that lack of correlation? I mean, 13 picks below ADP potentially here for Trevor Lawrence. Would you take that stab, or just the correlation factor not good enough for you?
I don't think it's a bad play. So if we wanted to go Trevor Lawrence, you then have Evan Ingram and Zay Jones as your stack partners later on.
Yep.
The challenge there is you are kind of then taking that QB to and a tight end in an area where you need running backs, and we are a little light on running backs.
Okay.
I'd probably go with like a running back here because we're still kind of playing this as a Tua team. I like Javonte probably the best. It also gives us a bring back to Mike Williams for that week 17 correlation.
Oh, yeah. Denver Chargers. Do you have any week 17 games? And I know that, it all depends on how the draft is kind of falling to you, but do you feel like there's been any matchups that you've been loading up on that you just can't wait for, or any in particular that sense?
Yeah, so in general, I'm not playing my draft so much on like thinking these week 17 are better than others. I think you kind of need to take a little more of a agnostic approach to week 17 and just say, hey, in the scenario that this game blows out, turns into a shootout, I want to make sure I have the pieces or the right pieces to it. A lot of it is kind of already baked in from the actual team evaluation standpoint. And like, obviously Cincinnati and Kansas City is a great game, but those guys are all going also in the first, second, third round for the most part. If I was to say like of the stacks that you can get later on that I like from a game environment, Las Vegas and Indy is a really exciting one for me. Las Vegas is just highly concentrated with Devontae and Josh Jacobs. And then from an Indy standpoint, this is when I'm hoping that Anthony Richardson is kind of clicking the most. And that's also, it's in a dome. So that's probably like the not expensive, but game that I could see turning into a sneaky shootout.
Yeah, it's no surprise too with my ownership numbers that the Giants chart and Rams one. Just hoping Stafford stays healthy. That Cup, I have quite a few Cup. Daniel Jones, Waller on the early ones when he was falling as far as he was. Got a few decent correlated teams there. I don't think I have any Cup Saquon, unfortunately. That would have been nice, but that's been the one I've landed on the most. And bringing up that one, well, Mike, I know I'm hogging the floor, so I just didn't know if you had any comments or points before we get to these two.
One question I did want to ask is not necessarily the Week 17 correlation. It's just stacking in general within one team.
Two just went.
I know.
That is a little early. But back to what I was saying, you think it's getting a little out of hand this year? I mean, I think now with more people getting into the space, like you said, some people are latching on to certain strategies. Like in some, more than once, I've seen Hertz and AJ Brown go at the 1-2 turn just so someone can get that stack. I personally think it's getting a little crazy. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, in general, I really like stacking, but you definitely don't want to do it at the expense of ADP value. And the earlier you reach, the worse it is. So for example, I think 1% Patrick Mahomes, like very, very little, might be 2. And that's because I'm never taking him in the second. I'm not getting that much Kelsey, and I'm definitely not reaching on a Kelsey Mahomes stack. So that's one where I believe it's going to be a pretty common stack. A lot of people are doing it, and the teams that are doing it are also kind of at a disadvantage in general. So like that's where that to me is an overspend on a stack. What I've also seen is then like you grab like overspending on stacks with volume later on as well. And for me, that's more a play of the later they're drafted, the more I'm willing to kind of grab that third, fourth, fifth piece of the stack. The earlier they're drafted, the more draft capital you've already spent, the less likely I am. But getting back to where we are now, I think we got to start thinking about kind of a QB situation because almost all of our stack partners are in trouble.
Yes. And at minimum, Richardson does give us a little correlation with Jacobs, as you mentioned, in the dome. I think with one team here not having a QB, I'd be nervous to let Richardson slide. What do you think there?
I'm happy with that. This is the type of team where like I enjoy getting an Anthony Richardson because he can have a huge week 17 without needing correlation. We also can make an Alec Pierce, Josh Downs stack later on. I like Cortland Sutton a lot too, but given how strong our wide receivers are, I think it makes more sense to kind of lock down that elite upside at QB. And then I'm thinking like we probably want to go with another running back here.
Yeah, I do like the value. I heard you talk about these guys on your DraftKings show. Brian, I love the Washington running back values with obviously Gibson a little bit more valuable in the full PPR setting on DraftKings. Robinson potentially more valuable, but I've got a lot of Gibson, so maybe I do want to balance that out with Robinson. I mean, Sutton falls to us, though. I know as good as our receivers are, is that too many diminishing returns? We do have that correlation with Javonte, with Mike. What are your thoughts there? We got 30 seconds. Who are we going here?
That's a good question. So we have the Javonte. We could go Denver and make that like a Russ as our second QB. I don't hate it. Cortland Sutton is a value in general, I think. It may be like we can still go 7 wide receivers, but our last one is Josh Downs in like the 17th or 18th.
Right.
I'm good with that. And but like we also have to accept that if we end up with a 6 wide receiver team, that's not the worst too. If you look at our buys, we have 2 week 7, but I think that's it. If you want to confirm for me.
Let's check that out. Chase Hopkins. That's pretty solid. And then week 5 for Mike Williams and Mike Evans. So still rolling, 4 guys out, 4 quality guys at that as well. I wouldn't be opposed. I don't have too many 6 receiver builds. So that'd be a unique combo for me. Now, would you consider where's the limit for running backs? If you go 6 receivers here, are you doing that so you can then get 7, 8 running backs, or what are your thoughts on that? Given we haven't invested enough in that position, it looks like so far.
Not that many. I mean, I think we got to think about the rest of the positions. So we know it's going to be a 3 tight end team, and Anthony Richardson and Russell Wilson.
You might want a third there too,
right? Like. I mean, so here's my other thought with Anthony Richardson is if you're going to draft Anthony Richardson, you're playing for that he's actually got this pretty good season. When he has those pretty good seasons, you want to build a team as if you knew that he was going to have that great season. And so in those scenarios, you shouldn't be drafting a third QB. Okay, then my devil's advocate to that is, all right, but what if we accept that Anthony Richardson is going to have his flaws, he's going to have his bad games, and we're really just counting for him to have the big spike weeks in the playoffs? So maybe we want a third QB to get us there. I see both there. I kind of lean that this would be, especially if we have 6 wide receivers, a 3 QB, 3 tight end, and then that'd be a 3-6-6-3 structure.
Could be a real interesting build. Absolutely. Yeah, it's not like we completely abandoned running back. We still have Jacobs. If it's Jacobs of last year, I know there's the curse of 390. I'm a little bit wary of him and how no backs have ever bounced back well after seeing more than 370 touches. But the end of the day, if you're assuming you're right and he's running back 3, we'll be more than fine to just have 6 and hope that the later ones pan out.
The one challenge we're kind of fighting right now is Russell Wilson's ADP, I think, is 134, and we have picks 123 and 141 or 142. So it's kind of risky to kind of not take him at 123, but then it also doesn't feel good to reach an entire round on him. One thing I have been saying on streams lately is as we get into these last couple weeks of drafting, you're getting a lot more casuals in. You got to be more willing to reach on your stacks because other players are far more willing to kind of just grab an unstacked or a naked QB. I mean, hey, we saw Joey Lopez over here, Joey Loops, grab Tua before Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Unstacked Tua, the pick before Trevor Lawrence.
What the hell? Yeah.
Made 0 sense. But so that's why I'm okay with reaching a little more in stacks nowadays because I also believe that you can actually get more value and you're able to find more value at other positions with these more casual drafters. But we'll see who's available for us with these 2 picks and can make a decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. That makes total sense. I did do a draft, I believe it was last night, and Russ fell to 150, 160 even. I think there's a report that just came out about how, Sean Payton is willing to bench him after Stidham's huge day. So maybe there's enough negative juju in the air that we could wait for him. But is there anybody even worth waiting for him here on the board?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
let's take a look at the running backs. I also really like Dalton Kincaid. So if we wanted to grab our first tight end here as well, it's uncorrelated, but I just think he's the Dalton Kincaid goes. Rashad Penny feels like the easy pick here. Trey Sermon was waived today from the Eagles, so any kind of threat or risk of that or chance of Elijah getting waived is kind of out the window. So even just that makes Rashad a bit of value. Now, what's the Russ ADP? What's that?
So Russ is all the way down 138. So
I think we can gamble on that.
I think we can too. And I don't love Russ enough that if we don't get him, it's not breaking my heart. I know the correlation should say we absolutely need him. I did see someone take Mims here and they have Justin Herbert. So they'll probably be queuing him up.
Where did Mims go? Just so you can help. I see 113
right
so
here.
They'd be 137. Okay, maybe not. So he may have taken Mims just as the week 17 bring back. And I'm personally one of the ones that preaches that ideally you shouldn't be drafting the same 2 QBs in the same week 17 game because both QBs are highly correlated. We're up now because both QBs are highly correlated, basically limiting your options for shootout games, and you're not actually getting that much because one QB goes off, the other QB goes off too, so you probably already hit that game outcome anyways.
Right.
Tank Bigsby. Let's see, what other running backs do we have?
There's Jamal, Elijah. We could. I mean, is this where we look at Mostert already?
That's what I'm looking at now. Like,
I'm intrigued.
I like it. I say we go Mostert.
Yeah.
This is where, Michael, we talked about earlier, like your team telling a story from a running back. We grab Javonte Williams, who we expect to kind of come off to a slow start. Who's going to be starting strong? It's Raheem Mostert. And I think he's the kind of number one, the primary in that offense, at least to start off. Yes, HN came back into practice today, but I still think like they're going to squeak in. He's going to, move in very slowly. So yes, this is definitely an ADP reach, but also I think this is one where we've got news that came out today, the Jonathan Taylor, that we're actually more appropriately valuing him, and he fits well with his team.
Yeah,
someone that comes to mind for me. Someone that comes to mind for me as a running back to pair with one of those guys, like if you got Gibbs, like you mentioned earlier, that might start slower, is Jamal Williams. I mean, just because of the other option in the backfield is Kendre Miller, and with Kamara's suspension, is he someone that's on your radar at all?
Yeah, no, I think he could have been a decent one too. My concern with him is after these first kind of 3-4 games, I'm really concerned with what it's going to look like for him in that backfield. The reports on Kendre Miller have been pretty strong ever since he kind of passed his physical. It seems like, he's got a nice combinatorial skill set where he can be both a pass catcher as well as a rusher in that offense. I think Alvin Kamara is going to have a bounce back year after last year. So for me, it's just Jamal Williams. Like his upside's kind of minimal. We're not expecting him to get nearly as many touches from the 1 yard line as he did in Detroit. So I agree with you, like definitely from a structural wise, that him pairing him with Javonte is a good ad. Yeah.
I agree. His upside is definitely capped, and that's just for me, it's hard to make that click. But I think I agree. Just kind of he fits this build, but I don't think Mostert's a bad call there either.
We had Waddle as well too. So maybe we find a couple late Ravens. Isaiah likely start to build that Week 17 type of thing. So yeah, I'm with it too.
Don't hate that. Yeah. Jamal Williams is also 28 years old. He hasn't been good for like a year or two. I actually liked him a lot with Green Bay. I thought he was always underrated. And it's tough when it's like that guy you really like who's been underrated and you want to shine. And then a couple of years have gone by. Now he's 3, 4, 5 years older. Now he's 28. And it's like, okay, yeah. Now the people that thought what he was 5 years ago are finally correct. There we go. And we got some.
There he is. Our gamble paid off, and this one works out quite well. So perfect. So Richardson, Russ will at least be starting the year, so we'll see how that goes. I don't think he gets benched, and Sean Payton's been a wonder kid of a coach before, so I'm excited to get some pieces of that offense. I haven't gotten a ton of Russ exposure despite having decent Sutton and Williams shares, so I like that. I'm glad we took that gamble. What are you kind of queuing up now, though? We're kind of all over the place. We have no tight ends yet. What are you thinking?
Sam Laporta is about a round of value if he falls to us at a position in need, and there he goes. That's perfectly fine. Of these running backs, Damian Harris and Kenneth Gainwell are a bit of a tier above the rest for me. Kenneth Gainwell, though, we have Rashad Penny. Yeah. I don't mind grabbing two in the same backfield, but I'm more concerned about our bye weeks. That would be our third running back with a bye week of 10. So I'd prefer Damian Harris if he falls to us. I think Damian Harris's slide from ADP is because he was actually out of the games with the injuries. James Cook, when he got actually that goal line carry, when he got the usage, that's because Damian Harris wasn't playing, and they're not trying to use a bunch of Latavius Murray in the preseason. Now Damian Harris comes back. It's pretty clear, it is clear that we don't know how they're going to be used, but it's likely that Damian Harris will have more of a role than this James Cook hive that has pushed him up. And he goes. Okay.
Yeah, I don't like Zeke at all, and I'm a Pats fan.
No. I'd go Roshan.
Yeah, bounce out. Okay, Roshan, week 13. You don't consider Purdy, Pickett, any of these QBs to balance out the third QB at all?
Not if it's not correlated with a stack
Okay.
for that third one. So like I'm thinking maybe a Baker Mayfield or a Ryan Tannehill at the end of the draft. Those are the types that I don't know. Like, because as we said, like we have those two QBs, we have the Anthony Richardson. We definitely don't want to overspend on a third QB. But if I can get an 18th round Baker Mayfield or Ryan Tannehill, I think that's the perfect amount of kind of combo. Because even if one of those were to get benched after week 8, 9, 10, or whatever, hey, that's when we're expecting Anthony Richardson to actually be in full drive.
Yeah. Perfect. I love the Baker call too.
Baker's looked good in the preseason.
He really has.
I mean, ugly to say.
This year's Geno Smith, like two great receivers to throw to, looking solid. Little bounce back for him. I think the Baker call's good, and he's been going largely undrafted, so he'd be one of those more unique players too. And that's a nice last round stab for us.
The one good, I don't know, the one good thing, maybe it is the only good thing, but one of the good things about Baker Mayfield as well is it should be a highly concentrated passing offense. Like, obviously it's not nearly as efficient as kind of the Dolphins. But like you're really looking at Godwin and Mike Evans. Sure, Kate Otten might get a few targets here and there and such, but like Russell Gage, he's down. Trey Palmer, yes, rookie explosive, but I'm not expecting him to kind of really cut into from a targets perspective. So if you can stack either Evans or Godwin or even both, like you know, if Baker has a good game, it's highly likely that your wide receiver did as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now that we're fully punting on tight end, obviously, like with this team, it has to do with the quarterbacks we have, but not considering this team, who are some of the late round tight ends that you're getting after? I'm getting a lot of Gerald Everett to pair with Herbert and a lot of Irv Smith to pair with Burrow, but in a vacuum, who are those late round tight ends that you like?
Yeah, so for me, after if I don't grab like a Kincaid or a Freiermuth in that area, then I'm really waiting a long time. And so the past month when I've been drafting, I mean, I was getting Jake Ferguson, I was getting Luke Musgrave, I was getting a ton of these guys in the 17th, 18th. Now, like as they move up, I still try to grab some, but I'm not chasing it completely. But like this late, it's not that big of a deal. The difference in ADP from 160 and 175, like it's fairly marginal, it's fairly flat. So I definitely like the Ferguson, the Musgraves. I think these guys are the talent is questionable. The role looks pretty clear. And the offense, I'm a little bullish on. I mean, Dallas, we've seen what Dalton Schultz and what tight ends have done, even Jason Witten in the past, like in those style offenses. For Green Bay, their offensive line was the best pass protective line in preseason this year. And that, when you have such a young team, no wide receiver is no pass catchers, like over 23 years old. You've got Jordan Love, who's a kid himself. Like having that strong offensive line is very important. And so I'm going over the volume. So I like those guys. There's not many guys that I dislike in this spot. I definitely try to primarily stack. So even though I'm not grabbing that much Greg Dulcich, they did just trade away another one of the tight ends. So, that helps us with the Dulcich aspect. Losing every wide receiver in that offense helps with the Dulcich aspect. So I think, Dulcich is the first one, and then we probably grab another tight end or two after that.
Awesome. I like the Dulcich call. We'll light him up here. First tight end. I know he's been falling. I mean, he was going as early as tight end 11 for a long time when he got the Joker praise and was going to be used like Alvin Kamara, I think one report said, which was just mind-boggling. But at this point, even if he is only playing on passing downs, he'll still carve out enough of a role that I think he's fallen too far. And from there, we're looking at Irv Smith, kind of pairing him with Jamar Chase and building that if he falls to us. What do you guys think there?
I like Irv Smith.
I think from a tight end aspect, like you look at where the teardrops are, I think Irv Smith definitely has a bit of a tier above the next one. So I wouldn't hate that at all. If this player is still on the board, I think Jeff Wilson should be the pick. And yes, again, it's a third by week 10, but we're getting a round of value on a player that should be going the other way. Getting the Miami backfield for rounds 11 and 17, that's too good to pass up.
I would agree as well too. I actually was thinking about him over Dulcich because I thought Dulcich might have a better shot at falling to us, but we needed a tight end bad.
I consider that as well. And if you look because both those two players had two tight ends, and I don't know how good those tight ends were, but I was definitely thinking this could work. But if it wasn't stacked, I would have like the Dulcich is stacked. That's nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's hope
Jeff
Wilson falls.
I didn't see the double tight ends. Yeah, probably could have played that, but hey, we'll see. We'll see. We got
what's your thought on this Miami backfield? Do you think it's just going to be a pretty ugly timeshare, or do you think one of Mostert or Wilson pulls ahead early on in the season?
And there goes Jeff Wilson. Darn.
And there he goes.
That's okay. Let's grab Irv Smith, and we're still pretty content with the round.
Perfect.
So for me, I think Jeff Wilson has a better chance of getting the goal line work. I think Jeff Wilson, he really becomes a play when it's a volume aspect. And so he kind of needs an injury to Raheem Mostert or Devin Achane later on to kind of really prove value. But when he has been the guy back there, he's shown an ability to gain the trust. San Francisco, again here in Miami, by the coaching staff. But Raheem Mostert's the one that I like because of the actual explosiveness, used a bit more in the passing game. I think we're going to see a bit of a kind of, it's not even a thunder lightning with them. It's more of just like a 1A, 1B, a yin and yang situation. And so, how do they do that? Like, how does it play out? I'm not really sure, but you're just going to be tied to that explosive offense and hope that, your guy's the one that catches the passes, falls in the end zone, breaks the big plays. As Devin Achane starts playing more, that's where it does become a bit more crowded of a backfield. I don't know who falls off. Like, his game is most, it kind of is most similar to the Raheem Mostert with the flashiness aspect. But I also think like they like Mostert a little more. So it's going to be interesting when Achane is back and healthy. Or does Achane just kind of take over the backfield primarily to himself and the other two just become kind of 2A and 2B? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a good point. Wilson did, though, when he first arrived there. I believe he ripped off like a 19-point day, a 21-point day, and had about a 12-point half against Houston. And then he got dinged up and just couldn't really fully work himself in. But Mike McDaniels has that experience with him from San Fran. I am not super pissed, but I think Dulcich would have fallen to us at this 171. Yeah. If I had one mistake in this draft, I think Jeff Wilson there at 166. Especially because I think Jarrett's had a few auto picks now, too. So wish we had recognized that one. I would have loved to see Jeff Wilson on this squad, but we did need the tight ends. I don't mind Irv Smith, Dulcich's pairing here. We'll see how the rest of it plays out. But
who were their first tight ends? Yeah, who were their first tight ends?
They had, and it looks like, so they got Laporta to stack it, and then, oh man, they had Andrews. So we could have known.
Yeah. All right.
TJ Hawkinson on the other team too. There's no way. TJ and Juwan, they weren't going to go Dulcichs.
Nah.
So, always watch your opponents there, everybody. Yeah, it's a takeaway for this one. We should have known, should have seen it coming.
All right. So thinking ahead, we got 3 rounds. We are looking for a QB, a running back, and a tight end. I think I'd rather have Tannehill than Baker. And so maybe it makes sense to kind of say, hey, the round 18, we know there's tight ends available that are fine, that maybe we say, hey, grab the QB. Assuming Tannehill's still available, is QB, what does QB look like? There's Tannehill.
He's still there, QB 27 there.
Because there is thing with
Deion Jackson sitting there as well. I don't know if that intrigues you or the Colts backs at all intrigue you. Who else were you going to bring up?
Yeah, so I think there are so many running backs right now that have not been drafted like Deion Jackson that we don't have to really reach for it. So I'd say we go Tannehill here. And then
do you really like Tannehill that much more than Baker? I know it could be the play, but the way Baker's looked, I got a weird feeling about him in the gut. I don't know.
Tannehill's, on his career has looked a lot better. He's also got more of a ground game. His weapons a little better as well.
All right.
I don't know.
It's just going to be a better offense. You're the guest tonight, so we'll follow your call for sure. But if Baker's the next Geno Smith, you'll hear from me. I think it's a good play, though. And then maybe Deion will fall back on the way. Or is there any other players you're looking at?
I like Chuba from a running back perspective here. I think there's a ton of tight ends that we probably don't need to grab one now. So for me with the Indy backfield, I think to start off at the beginning of these first few games, you're looking at a mix between Deion, a little bit of Hall, Zach Moss when he's healthy. But I don't think we should be really targeting indie backs when the Colts are probably going to stay with him. And maybe he comes back in week 5. I think like it was more of targeting those indie backs when Jonathan Taylor was going to get traded and such.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And we have Richardson too, so it seems a little bit negatively correlated there.
Yeah.
Had we been going after him. So you think Chuba's the play? I have been liking Williams late at running back as well, getting some positive steam over there. I know it doesn't really correlate to our team at all, but that's another guy I've been bumping up later. I don't really see much else. I'm not into Clyde. Ford, I actually think Pierre Strong might take that second job over. So I don't have a lot of Chuba, though. So I could absolutely be talked into him. Do you think that's the play here?
I'd go Chuba. I think with Chuba, it's pretty clear that, the Carolina wants to be a run-first team. We saw that even last year, and they ran pretty effectively with a combination of Deonta Foreman and Chuba. Yes, they bring in Miles Sanders, new coaching staff. But I'm not even sure how clear it is that Miles Sanders will be a 3-down back. So I think Chuba can have some, in-game standalone value. But I think more importantly is it was pretty clear he's the number 2. Yes, there were murmurs about Raheem Blackshear throughout the offseason, but everything the team has shown us with who's getting reps, who's playing with the ones, that has been Chuba. So I think he's kind of a pretty safe number 2 handcuff that also may actually be getting some snaps and touches throughout games with Miles healthy.
I think that's very fair. And we know Miles' injury history, barely played this entire preseason. If he's getting the true 3-down work, that's a great thing, but it could also lead to a breakdown. And Chuba I thought he looked significantly better in his second season than he did his first. As a rookie, not overly impressive, but I thought he definitely flashed last year when in that tandem with Foreman towards the end of the year. Definitely some impressive runs. So I think it's a good play. And I don't have much of him, so I like it. All righty, so tight end is how we're wrapping it up, right?
Tight end it is. And there's a bunch of tight ends here that I think we can go multiple ways. Likely has the correlation and probably the highest upside of anyone here.
Yeah, I wonder if our tight ends are good enough though that if he's not, somebody getting production without an injury in front of him might make more sense here as well.
It's tough because I do think that Isaiah Likely will play in two tight end sets. So I think he's still going to be on the field. Todd Monken does have a bit more of a kind of spread offense that he's trying to bring back for Lamar, almost what we saw at Louisville for him. So I'm trying to play through what is the actual raw projection for Isaiah Likely when compared to the other ones that are available now. I agree it's a little less, but if we're taking Cade Otton, maybe from a projection standpoint, Cade's going to be projected to score 2.5 more points per game. Maybe Zach Ertz, same thing. And when we're getting to those small margins, give me the upside. Now, Michael Mayer's another one where there is substantial upside there. The entire Notre Dame offense ran through Michael Mayer. Yes, he's behind Austin Hooper, and that's usually not good for a rookie tight end, and it may take some time, but we know he has that upside too. We also have that correlation for week 17 with Anthony Richardson. We have Josh Jacobs as well. And if this is a playoff bet aspect, it's Michael Mayer. If it's all right, there he goes.
Yeah, that would have been. I didn't even think about that with the Richardson bring back. That would have been nice.
But we have 2 Miami guys as well. Getting to Baltimore, bring back. If Isaiah Likely and Raheem Mostert are the guys you need in week 17.
Yeah. And God forbid, there's a horrendous injury to Mark Andrews early in the season. We've seen Likely the one game he started last year. Didn't he have 10 catches, something nuts like that? Yeah. So
you literally can't find it. You can't find a league winner in round 18 at any other position, even running back. Oh, there goes Likely. It's really hard to find that league winner. But Mark Andrews goes down and that it comes Likely. All right, now let's see.
Now we're looking at some ugly, ugly stuff.
Cole Turner. I'd go Cade Otton. Yeah, Cade Otton's who I'd probably go because just from being on the field. Mike Gesicki's actually not a bad one either.
I am intrigued by Gesicki. We could stack up Woods, but I don't know how much we want to rely on the passing game here.
Yeah, Woods has also missed the entire preseason. I'm more concerned with him in that role. I miss Noah Fant, but Noah Fant's actually probably my favorite player at this spot. especially to start the year. You're missing JSN for a bit. And for me, the number one recipe for finding late breakout tight ends are tight ends that have a questionable role, but attached to a very strong offense. We saw it 2 years ago with Dalton Schultz, with Dawson Knox, with Rob Gronkowski. Going into the season, we didn't know what to expect out of them, but we knew their offense were going to be good. They ended up being 3 of the highest passing offenses, and those tight ends each finished in the top 6 of tight ends. So when we're looking for what breakout is for that tight end, it's a lot easier for a tight end to increase his role than for the team to become a much better team and just the tight ends. It's so much of touchdown scoring on underdog. So the key is, can you just get it to a tight end that's attached to a high-powered passing offense and steals a couple more touchdowns than you expect?
I think that's a phenomenal call. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that one of the big things that led to your victory? Was it Rob Gronkowski? Or I'm trying to remember back in the day, you even sent me your team once. I had asked you for the DM, and you're very generous and sent it right away. Was that what happened in your 2020 bin back then?
Gronk was on the team. Gronk and I think I had Gronk and Kelsey, and both ended up playing. One was in the flex, but the big one was Alvin Kamara, had 6 touchdowns on Christmas Day.
That'll do it.
Merry Christmas, indeed.
And even Taysom Hill stole a touchdown too.
Yeah,
could have blown
very
it
greedy over there. Oh man, love it. Well, just to wrap up the squad here: Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Josh Jacobs, Mike Williams, DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Evans. And then we go Javonte Williams round 7, Anthony Richardson round 8, Sutton, Penny, Mostert, Russell Wilson, Roschon Johnson, Greg Dulcich's our one kind of regret, thinking that we could have probably gotten him around later and just pounced on Jeff Wilson, who should have been going around later, not around earlier. I agree with that assessment. Irv Smith, Ryan Tannehill, Chuba, and Noah Fant. Not a bad squad. Any last thoughts on this squad before we send you off, Justin? Thank you so much.
Yeah, not too bad. Appreciate you having me. Usually in drafts, I like to kind of feel uncomfortable at one position or maybe even 2. And what happens then is you're actually going with some elite upside at 1 or 2 positions. Here, I think our running backs are pretty strong. I think our wide receivers are extremely strong. And I'm okay with having light tight ends. And then for QB, we might be uncomfortable, but we're also playing for upside with that Anthony Richardson aspect. So this is a team that I think hey, it's projected to probably be a middle-of-the-road team, but if Anthony Richardson actually performs well, if we hit on one of those kind of other running backs besides Josh Jacobs, it's got a chance to advance and kind of make some noise.
Awesome. I think that's a great final assessment. Well, why don't you just let our fans and listeners one more time, remind them anything you'd like to promote, where they can find your work and all that good stuff, and then we'll head out.
I appreciate that. So at Justin Herzig, you can follow me on Twitter. The biggest news for us today is we just released for our game, the Owners Club, which is kind of like digital trading cards and fantasy football, free starter packs. So you can claim a starter pack, open it up, and play in contests for free all year long, win prizes. It's a really fun way to kind of play fantasy football that adds a team position dynamic, so you don't have to worry about injuries, vulturing, any of that stuff. Check out my Twitter. I've got a couple posts there, or feel free to send a DM. But guys, I appreciated this, really enjoyed it, and solid drafting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll send you a picture of the squad. If this takes down the 3 mil, we'll be sure to split it with you. Thanks again so much, Justin. Really appreciate it. Stay safe with the weather over there as well.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a good one.
All righty. Thank you again to Justin. I know we got a few questions in there in the mailbag, so we'll hit those real quick as we always do, guys. Thanks again so much, Justin, though. That was such a great time to be able to draft with one of the best minds in the game. So fun there. We got Mike hitting us up with a ton of different questions, which is great. But yeah, what were your thoughts over there, Mike, as we wrap up here?
I was just happy to be here and listen to him talk. I mean, he's obviously one of the sharpest guys in the space. So getting a little bit of one-on-one time and be able to bounce some questions that I had personally off him, it was great. And I think the team turned out really well. Just having only drafted, I don't know what round we ended up grabbing our second running back, Williams, but 7th or 8th, I would assume. Yeah. But having waited that long on developing that position and really developing the other positions outside the receiver, I think it turned out pretty phenomenal. I mean, we've talked about before Anthony Richardson being that guy to target if you do punt on quarterback, and we grabbed him. So I think this team, for how unbalanced it kind of seemed while we were drafting, I think there's a lot of high upside guys like Justin mentioned, and I think it's got a chance to do some good things.
I'm excited to see how it goes. Definitely some uncommon stacks for me. I haven't been much into the Russ Wilson and certainly not the Ryan Tannehill game. What was your assessment there? Should we have gone Tannehill, or were you more on the Baker side of things?
I like Tannehill.
Yeah.
I agree with you that Baker might be like he might be the more exciting pick and could end up being better, but I like Tannehill there. But who knows? I mean, you're drafting quarterback 27 and 28 probably on ADP. Like it's hard to have a strong take either way, but I think Tannehill's probably the better option there.
Awesome. Yeah. I definitely the safer option. We'll see how that all plays
out.
But Mike,
definitely
hitting us up with some great questions here. So I don't sleep more than 7-8 hours a day. Yeah, that's right. I can squeeze all these drafts in exactly.
Yeah.
4 hours of sleep. Wait for a QB. That's what we absolutely did. I wonder who he was thinking there. Take a tight end now. Certainly we punted the position, so I wonder who was sitting there. It was right around where Russ went, so I'd have to look back and see. But yeah, as he says, like now you have to take 3 tight ends, and he liked Tannehill as well. So, so great draft. Added him, so that's great. A new follower there for Justin Herzig. You can find me at Roto Street Wolf if you don't already follow me there, Mike, as well. Follow our guy Mike O'Hara as well. Where can he find you, Mike?
Michael__O'Hara on Twitter. I'm liking all the stuff from RSJ. You can find my content on my Twitter and go find me on the RSJ website.
Hell yeah. And we got, I don't like Russell, would have waited, and so I don't really like Russell either. We just ultimately got the stacking. And that's kind of what Mike is asking here is explain the upside of stacks, please. I still don't see the value. And so do you want to take a stab at this to start, or do you want me to kind of dive in?
I can. I don't think I'm going to be able to explain it as well as Justin might be able to, but basically the general idea is that you're looking for correlated success. So in these tournaments, you want to maximize how many points you're able to score, and you do that through correlated success. So when a quarterback has an explosion of a game, their pass catchers are obviously going to have an explosion of a game unless they're checking it down to their running back every single time, like my Austin Eckler type of deal or something. But the basic idea is that when you capitalize on the explosive week of the quarterback, you're also getting that from the receiver, and that maximizes your total points.
Yep, exactly. If you play any daily fantasy, any DraftKings, you almost exclusively have to stack your quarterback with at least one receiver, often 2. And then what happens is what we call the game stack, where you want that game to blow up. So you're just thinking from a 1-week perspective. You want to identify what do I think is going to be a high-scoring game. Often to win the million on DraftKings, it's what's going to be the underrated high-scoring game, because everybody can say, oh, the Chiefs and the Bengals are going to blow up and their prices are going to be there too. But if you can find those cheaper stacked games that then end up blowing up for 50 to 55 combined points, that's where you can get some real value. And that's where the week 17 stacking, not only just the team stacking, as Mike was just outlining perfectly, if Russ does well, that means usually his weapons do well. So obviously if Mims has the big day or Judy, that doesn't end up helping the weapons we invested in. But more often than not, Russ having a big day, maybe Sean Payton really does end up cracking the code and bringing old Russ back. We'd have a high upside, oftentimes high scoring division there. I like that a lot. But then you think of week 17 too. So that's where we had Mike Williams early. Then we got Javonte Williams start to get that week 17 Chargers versus Broncos game. What if that is the one that ends up shooting out and going crazy? We have a ton of weapons for that game. And that's kind of where you get the game stacks versus the team stacks, trying to correlate that. So in a regular fantasy roster, Mike, like if you're doing a redraft league, I don't think you overly have to stack. Obviously, it does help. If you get your Jalen Hurts and then Devonta Smith sitting there, why not use that to decide between 2 similarly valued players? But as Justin was kind of reaching for stacks in this one, it's so much more to be important to be correlated when you're facing 700,000 other people. You need to be the one getting that game right where all the points are coming from. You want to be that person that's standing there at the finish line with the right one. So both game stacks, both individual player and quarterback stacks end up being very, very important, Mike K, for fantasy success in these bigger tournaments as well. Did that make sense, Mike K? Let us know. You've been with us this whole time. I love to see it. You've been such a great fan, a great addition to the Wolfpack this last couple months. If if that didn't make sense, I'm happy to try to explain it again, but hopefully that does make sense. I'm not sure if you play DFS. That's where the world of stacking kind of was born, and then now people are applying it to this DFS. Mike Leone wrote a great article about it as well. It's called the Best Ball Manifesto over Establish the Run. So that would be
phenomenal.
Some good research as well. If you haven't read that, it's very dense, tons of graphics and great stuff to go with the dense text as well. But it's great research. And if you're going to start diving into these drafts, I would definitely recommend. He called stacking essentially table stakes, because if you don't stack, 10.5 out of 12 teams, I think, were stacking, is what the research suggested that he did. So you're really behind the ball if you're not stacking. I guess it's a way to be way different, and maybe your uncorrelated team goes nuts. But that would be a good read indeed. So sweet. Check out game stacks.
Awesome.
Check out individual team stacks. Mo, great to see you as always.
It was a great time.
Yeah, always a great time. And again, thank you so much to Justin Herzig at Justin Herzig on Twitter. Go check out Own the Moment NFT as well. Justin's just an awesome guy, clearly a very smart brain, the only person to ever make it to 3 finals. So maybe this will be the one that also goes to the finals too. Would be awesome to see. So go check him out as well. And you can find all our content at rotostreetjournal.com on your way out. That thumbs up button. Should have probably called for that earlier. And of course, if you haven't played on Underdog, use code RSJ or the link in the description. We get a nice little kickback. You can get up to $100 matched as well. So if you want to support your boys, and be on the lookout for the draft guide launching, I think, tonight. So we will see on that thing as well. Yeah, it's all done. The payment process is there. It's smooth. We just have to start promoting it, baby. So check out that fantasy as well. Hell yeah. All right, you guys. In a world of fitness sheep, be that wolf. Later.